47 megs, 47 and a half megs for 40,000 records, and probably each one of those records probably has maybe 20 fields of information. So again, it depends on the number of fields of information you have, not only the number of rows.
Would that include the indexes? And
yeah, that includes everything. That's the entire. The indexes are built automatically by 6. It's not something that you have to rebuild like it was in 5. It'll build them automatically.
So you said that you can't do batch updating at this point. You know, batch updating of georeferences, or say somebody gives you measurements for mammals and you want to add them.
You
as
can't
an
augment existing records in your collection using the workbench, no.
Or any batch updating. Where is that in terms of your time frame for development?
I really don't know. It is definitely one of the things that's high on the priority list, but when it's going to be implemented, I really don't know. But it is something that they're looking at because of this whole georeferencing scenario. A number of these portals are starting to ship back large quantities of georeference material, and so it is something that the community is asking for.
And they'd be not just georeferences, but all different kinds of data.
Yeah, anything. Yeah. You know, anything that has an existing record in your database that needs to be augmented with more data cannot be done through the workbench, but it can be done by your IT folks. I mean, it's very easy to go and, you know, match records in a data set against records in a file and just augment them that way. It can be done.
You brought up the question of, you know, how big are these files? Where do these files live? Because you know, currently our files live on a server. We have associated images that we upload into an image database, and you've showed the functionality of being able to attach, you know, Word documents and PDFs. So when you're doing that, are you uploading it to a centralized location, or are those you're just loading a file location?
You would be in exactly the same scenario. Your database would be residing on a server somewhere, and all of you would be logging onto your database from a remote location, so that multiple people could log into the database all at the same time. And then your IT folks would provide you with a file or a directory somewhere on that server where you could lodge all of your materials that you wanted to connect up to the database. Your images, your PDFs, whatever it may be, because those are all stored outside the database.
Right.
It just creates links to those documents. But you know, other than that, if they provide you with a directory that you have write privileges to on the server, you would just go and dump all your images in there and then connect them up. If you connected up to an image on your local machine, you would be the only person who could see it.
Okay.
And anybody else who tried to link to it, unless they had that file in exactly the same location on their machine, wouldn't be able to see it. So yeah, you'd be in exactly the same scenario as you are now. Yeah. Go ahead.
Is file association then a URL, or is it a file path?
It's a file path.
So if I
and
want
there's a blanket mechanism in the preferences where you can go and set that file path as a default. So that if ever the IT folks decided they didn't want your images here, they wanted them here, you could then go in and just change that file path, and all of your links should still function based on that new file path.
But if those images were being managed by some archival service, is there a way that I can say, no, this is the...
Yeah, you can create a URL link to those.
Okay.
So you can create a web link out to things like MorphBank. You know, we're working with them to try and get a system in place where you would be able to not only see images in MorphBank within your collection based on a web link, but you would also be able to lodge images with MorphBank from within Specify. So you'd be able to connect an image up to your specimen, and then there would be a button at the bottom saying lodge with MorphBank, and then a panel would come up where you'd enter all the ancillary information, and then you would just say go, and it'll lodge it with MorphBank. Same sort of thing with barcoding of life for sequences. You would be able to go in and you'd be able to lodge sequences with GenBank, but also be able to search GenBank for sequences that correspond to your specimen or whatever. So all of those sorts of things are possible.
Does it currently have can you just put in a digital object identifier and it will, you know, link it out? Because we have that works for a lot of publications. We don't necessarily need to host the PDF if it's already out there as a
you could do it. You could do it through a web link if there was an established web link that had a structure to it. You know, the way you set up a web link is that you would have a structured URL path, and then within that path you have wildcards for the particular element that you're looking for, and then it just takes that element from the image that you're looking for and plugs it in, and then goes out and searches for it.
So do all your images need to be in the same place? So does it always append the the file path prefix to all
Yes.
the images? So you couldn't have...
No, you can browse anywhere. You can browse anywhere for a file and attach it. But there is a preferences panel where you can go in and manipulate where that path is coming from, if you want to. If they are all stored in a single place and that single place changes, you can then go and change that file.
But you
path
don't
and
need
all.
to put
But
that
you don't
file
need to
path
have
there.
it. No, you don't need to have it.
So you could have all your
No, I mean,
images,
if you-
every image could be on a different server
Yeah,
everywhere.
if you go
all
into
over.
specify and you go to enter data, collection objects, and you go down to the bottom and you hit here.
Is this
you hit-
live running off your laptop?
Yeah. And you go browse, you can browse anywhere for anything that you want to connect to that particular image. So you can go in and you can choose whatever you like. And you can connect it up. And you can add multiple images, whatever you want.
And that could be a fully formed URI or URL or whatever.
Well, actually, no. It has to be a file. If you're wanting to do it on a HTTP system or a URL system, then you would create it as a web link.
Right,
So
but it'd be HTTP colon blah 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 blah
Yeah,
file.
Exactly the same. Exactly the same sort of thing. Yeah.
How do you deal with, or do you deal with permits? Permits for.
Permits are part of interactions. So you have your permitting form here, where you've got permit number, what type of permit it is, who it was issued by, who it was issued to, the start date, the end date, and any remarks. And then those permits are linked to accessions or repository agreements or anything like that on the same sort of system. So you can go to an accession, and here's the accession record, and as part of the accession record, you have your accession authorizations. And again, that's a one-to-many relationship, so you can have multiple permits, an import permit, an export permit, and a collecting permit, all associated with a single accession. And the same thing with repository agreements.
So I'm from an anthropology museum, and I don't know if this will work. Instead of having a biological specimen that has a single taxon, we'll have something like a basket that will have identified the three component plant materials down to species. Can that be accommodated? And sort of a related
We are in
question,
the
what-
process of working on a separate data model for anthropology and archaeological collections, together with the folks up in Alaska
Mhm.
and the people at K-State. And so I'm not going to be drawn into giving you a time frame, but sometime in the future there's a very distinct possibility that there will be a data model, a separate data model from the natural history data model that will be used for anthropology and archaeological collections. We've got to the point of creating the data model, so essentially creating the data structure. That just needs to be vetted by the community and figured out if this is going to work for everybody. And then we can plug it in as a separate data model, and then you can run multiple collections, be they natural history, be they anthropology, and then the same sort of thing applies for living collections. At the moment, Specify doesn't handle living collections. All of the ancillary information that they need to keep about watering schedules and feeding schedules and all of that sort of stuff, we don't handle. But the same sort of situation applies. If the community gets together and gives us a data model, it's very easy to plug a new data model into the system and have that data model available for living collections. So the Anthro one is in the works. The living collections one is something that could be in the works if the community so wished.